Well, President Obama called Afghan President Hamid Karzai to praise him for agreeing to run off in the disputed presidential election. It comes as there appears to be some disputes inside this administration. Defense Secretary Robert Gates speaking out on the road saying we're just not going to sit on our hands waiting for the outcome of this election and for the emergence of a government in Kabul before coming up with a troop strategy. This comes after the White House Chief of Staff, Rahm Emanuel, essentially said exactly the opposite on the Sunday talk shows. What about all of this? Let's bring in our panel. Bill Kristol, editor of the Weekly Standard, Mort Kondracki, executive editor of Roll Call, and syndicated columnist Charles Krauthammer. Bill, you first alerted us to this fracture, if you will, of the Pentagon and the White House over whether there would be troops moving, troop levels determined before the Afghan government is stabilized. It appears that the Defense Secretary wasn't too happy about those comments.
Yeah, I don't think the Defense Secretary or General Petraeus, General McChrystal, Admiral Mullen, the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, they've been participating in this big interagency review, trying to figure out, help President Obama make his decision. Suddenly the White House Chief of Staff and the White House political advisor, David Axelrod, go out in the Sunday shows and say, hey, can't do anything until, it would be reckless to do something until we have a stable Afghan partner. And suddenly Robert Gibbs in the White House is saying the same thing. The White House staff tried to hijack this decision, in my view, maybe with the President's blessing, maybe not, because they do not want President Obama to commit fully to the war in Afghanistan. It's been very clear. Rahm Emanuel has been privately going around talking about Vietnam, handing out books about the Vietnam process. This is the last big reforming Democratic presidency was killed in Vietnam. They don't want to make the commitment that President Obama basically said he would make to this war a couple of months ago. I believe there's a pretty big rift between the White House staff now and the Defense Department from top to bottom, civilian and military, and most of the foreign policy professionals who don't think we can afford to, make a half-baked commitment to Afghanistan or pull out. I think President Obama is going to overrule his White House staff and go with Secretary Gates and the uniformed military.
So you think Defense Secretary Gates stands with General McChrystal on his request?
Totally. There's a uniformity up and down the chain. There's no split in the military on this one. And the military is offended. I mean, McChrystal was sent over there by Gates. They replaced a 4-star. The President made a commitment. They did a 5-week review with a lot of civilian advisors. They gave the President their best judgment. This is the troops we need to fight this war in the way you've asked us to fight it. And suddenly a bunch of political guys in the White House are saying, ooh, the polls are a little shaky. Let's send half the number of troops. The military really thinks this is just not the way to make policy.
More.
Yeah, this looks like an attempt to satisfy the international community and not solve the problem of Afghanistan. I mean, the election was fraudulent. Okay, so we're going to have a runoff. The runoff is going to be November 7th, when a lot of the polling places won't be open. For one thing, it'll take a lot of U.S. troop strength in order to protect the election. A lot of people are going to get killed by the Taliban. The day afterwards, okay, suppose Karzai wins. Is he any more legitimate then after an election? Only in the eyes of the international community. His brother, A.W. Karzai, is still down there in southeast Afghanistan selling drugs, is the big drug lord of the country, and the governance is no better. Obama's got to make this decision, and he's got to make it on the basis of are we gonna go for a victory in Afghanistan, or are we going to do something less than that? And it shouldn't depend on the outcome of this. Gates is absolutely right, and the military is absolutely right.
Charles, there have been numerous stories in a number of different papers and other different outlets, and I'm hearing privately from military commanders that there is a real concern about this decision process and even the sense of what it looks like.
Well, it's not just the process of White House appearing to preempt or overrule the military, and the White House not exactly having the background and the expertise that the military does. It's also the substance and the logic of it. I mean, what Gates was saying is, this is preposterous that you have to wait until after the election to decide on the troop level. After all, look, there are 3 things that we can say with the confidence about what the government of Afghanistan will look like after this election. It's going to be weak, it's going to be pro-American, and it's going to be corrupt. That's how it was yesterday, and that's how it will be tomorrow. More or less corrupt and more or less weak, but that's how it will be, and that's how it was a year ago. So it's not going to depend on the outcome of the election. That's the card that we're dealt in Afghanistan, and that's going to be. Now, the best outcome would be if you had a coalition, so you wouldn't have to have a runoff on all of the complications and more that talked about. But even so, that's going to be in place, and we know that today. So why would you hold off and delay a critical decision on the strength of our troops because you don't know the exact composition of the cabinet. It's nonsense, and I think Gates shot it down pretty strongly today.
Yeah, one half suspects that this is all domestic politics, that the White House knows that it's going to have to give up the public option on health care sometime in November, and make the left furious at that, and then it's going to have to make a decision on troop withdrawal, more troops in Afghanistan. That's going to make the left angry, and they want to push it off as far as they can till toward Thanksgiving.